A very good day to one and all. On my personal behalf and on behalf of Department of History, ASANSOL Girls College, in collaboration with Internal Quality Assurance Cell, we are going to initiate our 2 days long international seminar, ICSSR sponsored seminar. And for inaugurating this song, I welcome our student to please sing our department institutional theme song Amar Mukti Aloi Aloi, and then we will proceed further for the seminar.
আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় আমার মুক্তি ধুলায় ধুলায় ঘাসে ঘাসে এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় দেহ মনে সুদূর পারে হারিয়ে ফেলি আপনারে দেহ মনে সুদূর পারে হারিয়ে ফেলি আপনারে গানের সুরে আমার মুক্তি উড়ে ভাসে এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় আমার মুক্তি সর্বজনের মনের মাঝে দুঃখ বিপদ তুচ্ছ করা কঠিন কাজে আমার মুক্তি সর্বজনের মনের মাঝে দুঃখ বিপদ তুচ্ছ করা কঠিন কাজে বিশ্বধাতার যৌবশালা আত্মভোগের ভঙ্গি জ্বালা বিশ্বধাতার যৌবশালা আত্মভোগের ভঙ্গি জ্বালা জীবন যেন দিয়াহুতি মুক্তি আসে এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় এই মুক্তি ধুলায় ধুলায় ঘাসে ঘাসে এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় Hello. Hello. বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে ব্রাহ্মণ করমহোজ্জ্বল আজকে বরপুত্র শঙ্খ বিরাজতে শুভ শঙ্খ বাজতে অনতিমির রাত্রির চির প্রতীক্ষা পূর্ণ কর লহ জ্যোতি দীক্ষা যাত্রীগণ সহ সাজতে দীপ বীণা বাজতে বল জয় নরোত্তম পুরুষোত্তম জয় তপস্বী রাজ হে জয় হে জয় হে জয় হে জয় হে এসো কর্মী এসো জয় নরোত্তম পুরুষোত্তম জয় তপস্বী রাজদেব জয় দেব জয় দেব জয় দেব জয় দেব।
Thank you, dear students. It was a great performance. So now I once again welcome you all to the seminar session. And once again, I welcome all the dignitaries and respected listeners. Uh, and as you know, since the inception for the idea of this conference, writing the proposal for getting the grant, AGC focuses on the three major E to advocate through seminar for which Indian knowledge system is seminal. These three E are equality, empathy, and environment. Notable political scientist Daniel Elazar, American Israeli political scientist, he is famously warned us that there is no unity without diversity, and an organized and meaningful diversity is unsustainable without unity. India is the country which believes in the idea of Atmana Mokshatham Jagat Hitayacha, where each one of our individual scholastic mastery should be useful for the population. And now I would like to welcome all the dignitaries to proceed for the lighting the lamp. And as you all know that Indian knowledge system always advocate for the tamosoma jyotir gamayo asotoma sat gamayo. And Leonardo Cohen, one of the modernist poet, he often embarks upon there is a crack in everything, and that's how light gets in. So let there be light, and I welcome all of you. I welcome especially our Honorable Vice Principal Sir, Dr. Shondip Kumar Bhattuk, our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Biru Rajo, our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Devashish Bandyopadhyay, and all other respected dignitaries. Especially, I would like to welcome Dr. Nisha Thakur Madam, Professor Sharif Khan Sir, and I would request Rohini Madam to welcome the dignitaries and help them to proceed for the lighting the lamp session. All the departmental faculty member of Department of History, I would request, please come forward. Senior Professor Noina Bandyopadhyay, Sujoy Senmukto Sir, Professor Vishwajit Das Sir, I would request you all, and Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay Sir, please come forward for this great session.
এক্সাক্ট একটু বন্ধ করে দিন এখানে পরে ছেড়ে দেবো আপনি নিন
Now I would request our Honorable Vice Principal Sir, Dr. Shobhit Kumar Ghatak Sir, please come up on the stage. And our IQAC Coordinator Sir, Dr. Viru Rajok Sir. And I would request our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Devashish Bandyopadhyay Sir, please come up on the stage. And I would request Honorable Anisha Thakur Madam and Honorable Sadiq Khan Sir, please come up on the dais. And the brainchild of the conference, convener of the conference, Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir, I would request you please come up on the stage. Now, our Honorable Vice Principal sir will felicitate Honorable Vice Chancellor sir. I would request the volunteers to please come forward. Sir will felicitate them. Please come forward. Small token of love from our end. A book edited by from the Bengali department. The editor is Professor Nafisa Parveen Madam. One of our conference and the outcome of the conference and all the papers have been documented there. So we are privileged to gifted that book to Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir. Now I would request our IQAC coordinator Sir to felicitate Dr. Nisha Thakur Madam. Please put a big round of applause for the respected dignitaries. Next, I would request Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir to felicitate Professor Sharif Khan sir. Now I would request now our seminar convener Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir will felicitate all the respected dignitaries with proceedings and brochure. So I would request Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir to please come forward and felicitate our Honorable Vice Chancellor sir and Nisha Thakur Madam and Sharif Khan sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor sir, now Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir is going to felicitate you. Professor Nisha Thakur Madam, Dr. Mallavan Chattopadhyay sir is going to felicitate him. Right? Professor Sharif Khan sir. Dr. Malluvan Chattopadhyay sir is going to felicitate him. Now, Dr. Malluvan Chattopadhyay sir is going to Dr. Malluvan Chattopadhyay sir is going to felicitate our Honorable Vice Principal sir with a flower bouquet. Now, sir is going to Malluvan Chattopadhyay sir is going to felicitate Dr. Viru Rajok sir, our Honorable IQAC coordinator. Now, now it is time to listen from our guardian and the man who is playing a pivotal role to establish a newly formed university, Kaji Nazrul University, to take a new height and serve as a continuous driving force. And his leadership and his guidance is taking Kaji Nazrul University and its affiliated colleges to a new height. So, sir, we will be privileged to listen a few words from you on the mark to inaugurate this session. ICSSR sponsored 2 days international seminar. So, sir, we are eagerly waiting for your speech. Dr. Devashish Bandyopadhyay, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Kaji Nazrul University.
A very good morning to all of you, and at the same time, my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers of this program, the ICSSR sponsor, and a very relevant, a seminar based upon a very relevant theme, especially relevant because of the new curricular innovation and change that had taken over the entire country today. Not only because of its formal curricular aspects that this particular topic is important, but at the same time what is required as adding value to education is something that is exactly being spoken of in this particular regard. Adding value to education. We generally, in this labor market capitalist system, pursue a kind of education which is labor market driven, and I would call it instrumental education. We are not preparing ourselves to sell ourselves in the labor market. In order to do that, any person gaining some particular skill can very affordably do it. We don't require 12, 15 years of education to sell ourselves. That is not our motto. So what had been lacking in our education system, in spite of all the classical heritage that India had been proud of since times immemorial, in spite of that, we were lacking in the intrinsic value of education. We were instrumental, but we were not intrinsic. Intrinsic in the sense of how we are gaining capability. This happens when you become an administrative head. Just a minute. হ্যালো, আমি একটা মিটিংয়ে আছি, আমি বলে দিয়েছি আপনি কন্ট্রোলের সাথে যোগাযোগ করুন। ওকে। Intrinsic value of education means the capacity that you grow at every grade and every stage of your development. It is not necessary that you require to finish 4 years of undergraduate education to gain a sort of a skill. Your capacity is being developed every moment, every semester. That is why you must have noticed that the new education, the National Education Policy 2020, had incorporated within its own system the requirement for getting in and getting out, parallel entry and parallel exit. After second semester, you have grown a sort of a skill, which means capacity. Capability can actually be developed at every moment. So that capability, once you gain, you are now standing upon your own feet to make a parallel exit. So this is just some of the examples which tell us how instrumental education can be facilitated further. But the most important thing about national education policy was, and coming to the theme of today's ICSSR sponsored program, the most important thing, however, is the induction of value education. That had been the traditional, the classical motive of Indian culture, Indian religion, and at the same time, Indian social regulations. Why are we Indian for that matter? This value education was inculcated in the West during first time during the Renaissance, during the European Renaissance that took place in the 16th century. And that value education was further rationalized with a sense of envy and pride, which is to some extent linguistic during the Enlightenment era. But we would simply laugh at the West to see or tell that if we do not require 16th century to induct value education in our curriculum. It was 2,500, 2,600 years ago, during the time when the Atharva Veda was being written, during the time of Panini, during the time of Pingala, during the time of Aryabhatta, during the time of Brahmagupta, that value education has already been inducted. You can think about Greek and Roman civilization and the Greek philosophers who precede the European Renaissance. But then they will fall short when we will be speaking about the kind of rational scientific system that India had developed in the form of, say, Hindu medicine, Hindu mathematics, Hindu linguistics, or better to say, Indian mathematics, Indian linguistics, Indian medicine. What had been ingrained in our culture was, especially educational, curricular culture, from the time of the Vedas onwards, was the idea about two kinds of faculties that actually make us observe the external world. One is called the Paravidya, the other is called the Aparavidya. So, what is Aparavidya? Anything that you observe. The observed is the Aparavidya. And what is the Paravidya? The observer, who actually consists of infinite consciousness. The person who is observing things is the repository of Paravidya. There is infinite consciousness to which all the civil professions and civil disciplines like mathematics, like physics, like medicine, like linguistics, like astronomy, all these aparavidyas can actually become actuated. So without the para version of actuation, nobody can really take cognizance of the aparavidya. When I refer to intrinsic culture or intrinsic value addition to education, I am particularly emphasizing upon the traditional Indian notion of para sensation, para vidya, which was integrated in our value system, which was integrated into the Vedic system of education in India. Where is that Paravidya for the last 2,000 years? Where has it gone? That is why we will come to that particular topic of dissemination, how Indian culture was disseminated. The very notion of Paravidya, that means Para actually speaks about the immanence of God, whoever that particular notion of infinite God is in nature, in everything that is dominant in nature. One of the Jesuit philosophers and poets called G.M. Hopkins actually spoke about this immanence during the 19th century in England. He was a Jesuit scholar and at the same time a Jesuit philosopher and a religious being. Think about 14th century Kerala. In 14th century Kerala with Madhava, the very seeds of calculus was born. And And it was the Jesuit philosophers and Jesuit proselytizers, the Jesuit missionaries who carried the knowledge of calculus to the Western world during the 14th century with the birth of Madhava and his forms of dissemination. So, why I am relating to G.M. Hopkins? Because G.M. Hopkins's notion of Jesuit idea about the world actually comes closer in Christianity to the notion of parabha in the world. That means everything in the world is immanent with the notions of divinity. That is why we require to actuate our parabha by means of action. This is exactly what Vivekananda said in his Karma Yoga. That means you require to act in the right way in order to manifest your divinity and the ways of God. When, for example, you divide a particular number with zero, zero is something that comes from, again, Indian knowledge system. I'm slowly referring one by one. The different kind of greatness that India, in the rational system of understanding of knowledge, actually had actuated. So if you divide a particular number with zero, what does it become? Any students of mathematics, of course, Vinu is there. He will tell me immediately. A notion of an infinite series is born out of that. What did the world know about what infinitude was before the discovery of zero and before the discovery of infinitude? Out of this infinite series, the notion of the infinite series, the notion of calculus was born. That is why the idea of Godhead as infinite consciousness, the Paravidya, been actuated into a discipline of Paravidya called mathematics, had actually started ruling the world. That was in the 14th century AD. Let us come back. Let us get back to the time before Christ was born, or before the Greek civilization came to its head in the 5th century AD. Let us go back to the time of the Vedas. In the Rig Veda, the numbers 1 to 9 were mentioned. Apart from that, the 9 multiples of 10 were mentioned. That means 10, 10 into 2, 20, 10 into 3, 30, 10 into 4, 40, like that, 90. In the Rig Veda, the first 5 powers of 10 were mentioned, way back in the Rig Veda. Yajurveda extends that particular notion of 10's power to 12. It was Sridhara who taught us how to calculate Eka, Dasha, Shata, Sahasra, Ayuta, Lakshwa, Prayuta, Koti, 10 to the power 7, up till Parartha, 10 to the power 17. At a time, Sridhara is doing that at a time when hardly the European world or the Arabic world knew what number system is. However, there was some consciousness of geometry because Greeks actually developed the notions of geometry. But remember, there is a problem in geometry. Geometry always, before the advent of solid geometry, geometry always revolved around the notion of positive things. The idea of negative things was completely absent in geometry. Although the number system we mistakenly assigned to the Arabs, but it was actually born in India by the Hindus. It was not an Arabic concept. Why? I will tell you why. Because the Arabs didn't do it because they were following the geometric Greek pattern of calculation. And in Greek pattern, any notion of number, because they did not have notion of number, was calculated or measured in terms of geometric patterns. And in geometric patterns, you do not have any negative system. You cannot calculate through a negative notion the idea of area, the idea of a circumference, the idea of a particular square. So naturally, minus 5, minus 2, minus 3 are concepts that the Arabs completely neglected, and the Europeans, based upon the Greek notions of geometrical calculations, never could adopt. In such a state of condition, zero was discovered. When? We never know. Perhaps in the Greek Veda, the reference to zero was because there was the notion of 10 with 1 0. So in the Rig Veda it was, and think about the Vedas, the time when the Vedas was born. In the Ramayana there was reference to numbers, multitudes. How does this notion of multitudes come if the people cannot really imagine what multitudes are? Ah. Lakshmana cut the nose of Shurpanakha. Was it a story, a fiction, or could it really be true? In the Atharva Veda, there was a reference to 1,100 diseases. There was a reference to almost 100 different kinds of medicines. And more than that, there were scores of references to different kinds of operational techniques, of which the three major operational techniques, of course, was grafting of skin. You go to cosmetic surgeons, you go to beauty parlors in order to do up yourself. The Atharva Veda knew that. Much before any human beings in the entire world have had any inkling of what was happening in the East. But then the story is creation of a myth by the Europeans. With that I will end at the end. I will take 5 or 10 more minutes. So what was happening then at that point of time? There was screen grafting in Atharva Veda, which was known as, any one of you? Skin grafting in the Atharva Veda, whose European English translation was called rhinoplasty. It was present in the Atharva Veda. That is why forehead flap was cut and was reconstructed in the form of a nose. Now you understand the myth of Shurpanakha could have been true. It is actually a folkloric story. Although if you do not wish to believe it as a religious text, but the affective concern, the social, realistic concern of it is absolutely true. It was possible according to the notions of mathematics. Come to the very notion of numbers as I was speaking of. Say, for example, the Qutub Minar. The Qutub Minar, which came up in the 12th century AD, the Qutub Minar gives us the instance of the brilliance Indian metallurgy actually have had. The iron that actually goes into the construction of Qutub Minar, the basic frame, is unrusted. It's such a kind of an iron which does not rust. This is the kind of metallurgy or the metallurgical operations that India knew. I have been presented with a Dokra artifact today. For how long this particular Dokra artifacts and the artisans have been preparing Dokra art out of a traditional folkloric indigenous casting method in Bankura and Bishnupur areas, no one knows. We can simply use modern metallurgical techniques in order to give them greater advantages and convenience. Our university is doing that. That is the actual intention of using indigenous culture and the kind of indigenous techniques that we are really proud of. Our university, just a little diversion here, our university is creating silica-coated ovens in order to make the fuel cost of the Dokra artisans less and less, reduce the fuel cost, so that their profit becomes more. We are trying to do it. It has already been patented. Think about the number system. Let us get back to the number system that I was speaking of. You know about Roman numbers. When you were in class 1, you were in class 1 with 1. When you were in class 2, 2. When you were in class 3, 3. You are in class 4, 1, 4. 5, 5. What numbers were they? They were Roman numbers. Try to think about a number, say 4,888. Can you represent it in a Roman form? 4,888, an arbitrary number. It is possible to write it as 4888. Turn it into a Roman form. I'm telling you how big it will become. The Roman thousand is M. So for 4,000 you have to keep M, M, M. And then for 800, what you have to do, you have to create 1,500. 1,500 is in Roman is symbolized as D. So M, 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 D, and then you have to go forward to 300 more. That means C, C, C. Then you have to go to 800, it becomes 88. So how long it is becoming, if you can understand that. So the basic difficulty in Roman numeral system is the impossibility of finding finite number of symbols to symbolize infinite number of numerals. So the Roman idea of numerical system simply was thwarted. Nobody could take it. More than that, there was further difficulties. If representation of numbers was so difficult, then how would you go about creating the other operational arithmetic facilities, the arithmetic operations? For example, adding, subtracting, multiplying, uh, uh, dividing. More than that, square rooting, cube rooting, squaring, cubing. It was impossible with that big numbers. So what could the Greeks and the Romans really give to European culture? Their particular notion of rational mathematics, which they take pride in saying we are enlightened, had actually come from India. Their enlightenment was born in India. But how? We are slowly coming to that. More than that, when you divide a rational number by or square root a rational number, say for example 2, you square it 2. What is the value of pi, for example? The ratio between the circumference and the diameter. What is the value of pi? It's an irrational number. There was no way in which the Romans and the Greeks could actually symbolize irrational numbers. 2.17, 2.77. The creation of the decimal system, the value system in place on the decimal formations, again is a contribution of India that created a complete facility to the Western world. Now, these are questions that never raised in our minds when we were in schools, when we went to high schools, that these were something which we are learning as an European contribution, or is it something that we are learning as our own heritage? Nobody said that. Therein lies the politics, therein lies the trick. That is why you understand why this particular seminar is so important. What is Indian knowledge system and its decimation? I will slowly come to the decimation part of it because I have to cut it short. I have been called through phone to administer my jobs in my own university. Once this particular facility became very, very comfortably and ubiquitously accepted in India and in the Asian world, a sudden change of government took place. I'm speaking about the dissemination of this particular knowledge. We do not question this particular knowledge's etiology nowadays, the provenance, the birth of it, whether it was born in India or abroad. We have taken it axiomatic that it is a knowledge that everybody knows because of the kind of practice, because of its ubiquity. But then, why was it? There was a transition taking place. The transition is once the Abbasid Caliphate came to power in Baghdad way back in 750 AD CE, that means the Common Era, the Christian era, the Abbasid Caliphate came to power. They, Baghdad became a seat of learning. And in Baghdad, a lot of scholars started pouring in, just like almost like the European Renaissance, which actually took place in the 16th century. So in Baghdad, people started coming from the Christian world, people started coming from the Arabic or the Islamic world, and people started pouring in from India as well. At that point of time, you might be knowing Sindh, which now resides in Pakistan. had been a very important scholarly place where most of the Hindu scholars had actually joined into a huge task of academic revival. So scholars from Sindh were invited to Baghdad. And one of the most important Arabic scholars called Al-Khwarizmi, an Arabic scholar who compounded all these rational notions of India into a text in Arabic, which in turn was translated into Latin, which was called Liber Numero Indonatum. Libero Numero Indonatum means the liberal notions of number which comes from India. This is the text that became very popular with an Italian mathematician way back in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. It was He was called
আজকাল
Fibonacci,
লাইন কেটে গিয়েছিল, গ্যাস
the
ঢুকেছি
most
আবার।
important Italian mathematician, Fibonacci.
আমি ঢুকেছি,
Now,
আমি ওখানে
Fibonacci spread this particular knowledge, the Latin translation of Hindu mathematics, from the work of Al-Khwarizmi to the Italian world. At that point of time, another important French mathematician, I'm speaking of a time which is the 14th century, the medieval age. In 14th century, another important mathematician, Gerbert Rolak, who is also a bishop or a pope, better to say, a pope of Sylvester of France, he went to Spain. Spain at that point of time, throughout the Middle Ages, was actually populated by Islamic culture, Muslims. And anything which is non Christian, you know from your knowledge of colonialism in India, was considered to be pagan. Non Christian means something which is outside the world, exotic, which we do not require to acknowledge. So, any culture which is Islamic and was popular in Spain was considered completely pagan. And this particular French mathematician, Gerbert Rolak, who is called the Pope of Sylvester, came to Spain. From Spain, he learned through Fibonacci the notions of number, the number system. He went back he went back to France, and in France, he was immediately spurned by the common people and by the intelligentsia. You have come from Spain and you have learned this nonsense called numbers. This is exactly what is happening in history. This is all that you will learn as numbers. You might have been under the influence of sorcery. India means sorcery. The Islamic word means sorcery. Sorcery means witchcraft. You are possessed. You are being sorcerized. So people started banning this man, a famous mathematician called Gerbert Aurillac, who tried to spread the very notions of rational numbers to France. He was completely banned. And then the very way in which they used to calculate without numbers was the notion of abbacism. Abbacism. The Indian notion of calculation through numbers is called algorithm, from which the notion in the computer's idea of algorithmic techniques actually was born. The Indian notion of, or Hindu notion of working with numbers is called algorithm, whereas the Western word of calculating is either through geometric pattern or through abacus. Early in days of childhood, you must have come across abacus. এরকম একটা ছোট্ট প্লাস্টিকের যন্ত্র থাকতো, অনেকগুলো গুলি থাকতো বিভিন্ন রঙের, সেগুলো তিন মানে তিনটে দিকে, বাদ বাকি সাতটা এদিকে, তাহলে তিন আর সাত মিলে 10। This was a child's play in India when we were children, but that was a smaller technique for understanding numbers. But slowly, as we graduated, we started learning limit, indices, logarithms, and at the same time, we started learning calculus, differential and integral calculus. Although we began with that. So what was child's play in India was actually the intellectuals' work in the Western world. The entire Western world practiced numerical operations through abacus. And the abacus was completely a defeating system in comparison to the Indian number system. The Greeks could only think about 10,000 as the greatest number, and they used to call it myriad, M-Y-R-I-A-D. At the time when India is thinking about 10 to the power 17, 10 to the power 20. So this Abbasid system was very difficult to be uprooted. So the transition began. There was a resistance in the Western world, the Christian world, against this Arab-based dissemination of the Hindu system. This is true for mathematics, this was true for medicine, this was true for astronomy, this was true for linguistics. The same thing happened in, for example, when the development, if I had more time, I could have spoken of this, the development of yet another very important mathematical system out of which the IA, the what do you call the artificial AI, the artificial intelligence that you are now really hooked to, is being profited today. That is called the combinatorics. Combinatorics was born in India again. Just a little diversion before I come back to what I was saying, with which I will be ending. Combinatorics, have you heard of combinatorics? Those who are from mathematics know what combinatorics is. For example, in your high school, you must have read combination and permutation, isn't it? That is exactly what combinatorics was. And combinatorics was born from you will be stunned to know how absurdly it was born. It was born from the Ayurveda Samhita. How was it born? It was born out of Shushrutar's concept of the different kind of tests that were possible at that time. In Shushruta Samhita by Shushruta, he says, and when I'm speaking about Shushruta, I'm speaking about the times some 600 years before the birth of Christ. There were six kind of tests at that point of time. And these six kind of tests could be mixed in particular numbers in order to create different kinds of other tests. So if there are six kind of tests, and you take two tests at a time, TASTES, tests. Test means, say for example, sweet means madhura. Salty means lavala. In the same way, you say astringent means kasha, kasha. Kasha. In that way, there were six kind of tests. So what was Shushruta doing? Shushruta is trying to create other kinds of tests out of these six kind of tests. And he is taking two tests at a time. So according to the combination theory, it becomes 6C2 NCR. Those who are acquainted with mathematics. This is exactly Shushruta who discovers it. NCR. In the same way, if it is non-sequential, then it is NCR. If it is sequential, then it becomes permutation. NPR. This is exactly what Shushruta had discovered in India, combinatorics. Later on, Panini developed it in the classification of Sanskrit grammar, in the clarification of Sanskrit grammar. Non-contextual grammar is something that Panini actually lent to the Western world. We know about linguists like Bloomfield, we know about linguists like Noam Chomsky, but it was Noam Chomsky who gave the complete credit to Panini and said that without non-contextual Sanskrit grammar evolved by Panini, the notion of Boolean algebra wouldn't have been born. The kind of combinatorics that you require, the blocks, small blocks, grouped together in different forms in order to create a logarithmic table is exactly Panini's linguistic contribution to the world. So on the one hand, Shushruta is creating combinatorics. On the other hand, Panini's Sanskrit grammar is contributing to this particular culture. What did the West do with all these things? They created a picture. Just to give you one example, how the West completely discarded the East for a long period of time. I'm speaking about a picture that was discovered in the beginning of the 17th century. With this picture, I will end how there was a constant resistance against Indian Hindu system of numerals and Hindu system of knowledge. How slowly it got dissipated and percolated. The picture is discovered in an Italian museum. And the picture shows arithmetic as a goddess. Arithmetic is particular. Arithmetic as a goddess standing with a particular view towards a particular man. In front of arithmetic as a goddess is standing, is seating two mathematicians. One mathematician on the left is working with abacus, abacusist. On the right is a mathematician who is working with Hindu numbers. The face or the gesture of the mathematician who is working with the abacus is green. This is a story. I'm simply describing. This is actually a picture that I'm describing to you. Had I the picture with me, I could have actually put it on the book, on the screen. It was a competition going on between two mathematicians. One a Hindu mathematician and the other is a European mathematician. The European mathematician is trying to count numbers in a particular competition with abacus, and the Hindu mathematician is trying to count numbers with the use of Hindu numerals. And at the back is the goddess of arithmetic. The face of the woman, the face of the man who is working with the abacus is green. He's about to cry. Whereas the face of the man who is working with Hindu numerals is beaming with a smile. And the goddess arithmetic is looking approvingly towards that particular Hindu mathematician. From where is this picture found? This picture was found in the 17th century from an Italian museum. And more than that, what is most political and important here, the kind of intrigue that the West played was, instead of calling this Hindu mathematician uh, Aryabhatta or Brahmagupta or whatever Hindu name, this Hindu mathematician was given the name of Boethius, whereas the Western mathematician was given the name of Pythagoras. Both are Western names. So Boethius is winning with the use of numbers in the competition, whereas Pythagoras is losing with the use of geometrical notions of numbers. But both of them are European, as though the competition is taking place between two European mathematicians. See how the entire notion of Indian knowledge was subsumed under the veil of, under the veneer of absorption in the West and passing it as betokened as Western, Western, Western. Upon this is the Western Enlightenment born. That is why we are driven more towards a labor market driven culture where the very notion of Paravidya of India, which was amalgamated with the Apara kinds of rational sciences, we have completely forgotten. Thanks to the national education policy, in spite of all the criticism that we do against national education policy, there should be criticism. Of course, there is a lot of lacks and lacunas which request to be filled in. But one of the most important things, of course, I have to speak according to the theme. If I go on starting relating the kind of criticisms that the National Education Policy 2020 has, it would be unending. But then at the same time, this adding value to the system and making us aware of our own heritage, especially in terms of the eternal consciousness that the Parabhav requires to add. Without moving away from the rational ideas that we have had much, much before the European society and culture came to its help, is something that we have to remember, we have to be proud of, and at the same time, we have to assimilate. With this keynote, perhaps the entire seminar for 1 day or 2 days can continue. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a elaborative and enlightening talk. And sir has fixed the notion about the Indian knowledge system and East-West confluence. And they add, as this is the year of 300 birth anniversary of Immanuel Kant, and you know Aryabhatta and Syracuse, who discovered this pie. He often embarks upon the system which we consider as a belief that east and west, that our that Bhavbadi Darshan and Bostubadi Darshan. So there is a confluence and there is always an interchange. And Sir has right nicely spoken about these facts, and we are truly indebted to Sir for fixing the notion in a correct form. Thank you once again on behalf of Department of History and ASANSOL Girls College. And now we are going to inaugurate our abstract book, and our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, in presence of our Vice Principal and all other respected dignitaries, they are going to inaugurate this, unfold this abstract book. So I would request Dr. Malluvan Chattopadhyay, sir, to please help them to inaugurate the session. And now we are going to hear from our Honorable Vice Principal, sir. He's not only our Vice Principal, sir, he's one of the renowned social scientists and many awardee from the Indian Council of Social Science Research. His paper often referred in various journals. And on this theme, we are eager to listen from our one of the renowned social scientists. As you know, that when I started the seminar session, I referred one of the political scientists, and Sir is one of the renowned political scientists, and he has choked us in the science of theory. So one of the renowned theoretician and administrator and our guardian, Dr. Shodip Kumar Ghatuk, sir, on this theme, Indian knowledge system, East-West conflicts. Sir.
Thank you, Arnob. Respected Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, respected guests on the dais, respected delegates who are coming from different parts of the country, my respected colleagues and my dear students and guests. Today, Asansol Girls College is going to organize 2 days international seminar on the Indian knowledge system. And the very title of this seminar is extremely relevant whenever we consider the topic in terms of the new education policy 2020. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, have very lucidly explained the importance and the background and also the implications of the Indian knowledge systems which we should apply with our social life, and what is the importance in the present scenario of this Indian knowledge system. Uh, so many eminent scholars they have joined in this today's national seminar as Dr. Lipi Ghosh, former Vice Chancellor of Shona Devi University, Jharkhand. She is with us in online because she is not well. She informed us that if she will be well, then she will come physically. But still now she is not well, and that's why she is in online mode. She is with us, and very soon she will give her keynote address, and there we can get a very bright idea of the Indian knowledge system. Actually, we are running late, and that's why the Arnav has told and Arnav has given some adjectives with my name, but I am not at all that person. And I listen more, but I talk less. That's why I'm waiting the speech of Dr. Libby Ghosh and other scholars, and I firmly believe that today's deliberations presented by different scholars and resource persons certainly enlighten us and give us some fruitful academic pursuits by means of which we can redesign our course of studies. So again, I thank you all for coming this 2 days national seminar, and also thanks the organizer who have organized this 2 days seminar on Indian knowledge system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, Senior Professor from Department of History, Dr. Noida Bandyopadhyay and Professor Sujoy Sengupta, sir, is going to felicitate our Honorable Vice Principal, sir. Now, Professor Vishwajit Das, sir, from Department of History, he is going to felicitate Professor Sharif Khan, sir. I would request Professor Vishwajit Das, sir, to please come forward. And now I would request Dr. Mallovan Chattopadhyay, sir, to felicitate our IQVC coordinator, sir, Dr. Viru Rajut, sir. And as our Vice Chancellor sir rightly pointed out that the artificial intelligence and the mathematical advancement, the work of our Indian scholars was sometimes that was unheard. And today amongst us we have our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Viru Rajok sir, who is basically a computer scientist, and his work, particularly in generative AI-driven signaling system, and the public health concern of the signaling system has been recognized, and he got the patent out of it. And it is a great fortune for all of us that we have a great captain and a wonderful vice captain, and our honorable vice principal sir, and our IQAC coordinator sir. So I would request Dr. Viru Rajok sir to please come forward and say a few words about the Indian knowledge system East-West Conference.
Thank you, Anna. A very good afternoon to all of you. Today we have our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Devasis Bandyopadhyay, our Vice Principal, Sir, Dr. Sandeep Kumar Ghatak. We have a resource person, Professor Lipi Ghosh. She joined online mode. She is waiting from last half an hour, 1 hour. Uh, Basically, she is not well, but instead of that, she joined us by online mode. So, special thanks from the IQAC to the Lipi ma'am. We have delegates from the various college, university, students, and faculty members of the ASANSOL Girls College. Thank you. Thank you all on the behalf of IQAC team. We know knowledge is a power, and definitely power is spread when it's power is strengthened when it spreads, when it is shared. Definitely in 2 days program, ICSSR sponsored a seminar. Total more than 70 presenters are here. We will share our knowledge to strengthen power. So again, on the behalf of IQAC, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome all. Thank you.
Thank you all for your patience listening. And this was the end of the inaugural session. And we are really fortunate to receive and to have all of you in this inaugural session. Now, I would request all the respected dignitaries, please take your chair off the dais and we will move forward towards the technical session. And I would request Dr. Rohini Kaur, Madam, to please come forward and lead the technical session. Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Onu Chatterjee. We had a really enlightening session. Now we move on to the main segment, the keynote address by Professor Dr. Lipi Ghosh. Dr. Lipi Ghosh, though she is unwell, she is there with us online and she needs no introduction as she's a name to reckon with in the discipline of history in modern times. A vastly read and immensely erudite scholar, Dr. Ghosh, as as we all know, has been the former Vice Chancellor of Sona Devi University, Jharkhand. She had also donned several hats. She had been the Centenary Chair Professor of International Relations, University of Calcutta, the Director of the Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies, as well as the Director of Women's Study Research Center, University of Calcutta. She has played a multifaceted role in academia. So we are fortunate that despite being unwell, she has devoted her time to be with us online. We now welcome Dr. Lipi Ghosh to present her keynote address.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope I am audible. Can someone tell me if I am audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. Okay. So, first of all, I must congratulate your college for organizing such a very, very important topic for international seminar. And I'm very sorry and I feel apologetic that suddenly from 2nd of June I'm suffering from a peculiar kind of vertigo. And this is very unpredictable. And so doctor advised me not to travel for 1 week. So it is unfortunate that I could not join you personally. But anyway, I'm happy that I can at least see you virtually, and that's a boon of COVID, of course. And your topic is about Indian knowledge system. And what I'm going to talk today, that is, I have chosen three basic components, that is Vedas, Upanishad, and Vedanta. And everybody talks about the essence and narratives of these Vedas, Upanishad, Vedanta. But my contribution will be to discuss that how these Vedas, Vedanta, and Upanishad can be applied in our everyday life, which is very important. We know that knowledge in a theoretical way, but it must have some application. And your chancellor, vice chancellor sir has already told you that the issue of morality, and that morality can come only if we can apply practically this our ancient knowledge into our everyday life. So I have a PowerPoint. So I will try to you that because it will be more attractive. Okay. It's removed. I don't know why it is not coming. Uh, Anyway, if it doesn't come, doesn't matter. It is in front of me, so I can tell you. You cannot see, but you can get the essence of these things. First thing is that what is Indian knowledge system? Definition. Definition is that Indian knowledge system is an innovative cell under Ministry of Education, and it is established to promote interdisciplinary research on different aspects of IKS, that is Indian knowledge system. And this Indian knowledge system is championed by government, and it embodies a holistic and culturally rooted approach to education. This is very important. We are all educationists, either teacher or student. And that way, it is important to understand that applicability of this holistic and culturally rooted approach to education. Next important point is that this Indian knowledge system comprises of three things, that is Gyan, Vigyan and Jivan Darshan. That is philosophy of life, Jivan Darshan, and Gyan and Vigyan you know very well. And these three things are evolved out of experience, observation, experimentation, and rigorous analysis. And the tradition of validation to practice that changes different aspects of society, including education. Now, why in modern world Indian knowledge is important? It is important. Indian knowledge system extent is rich to governance and ethics. This ethics is very important. And even today, Chanakya's Arthashastra still can put insights into statecraft, economics, and political strategy. And that way, here lies its importance. Then, one thing is that how many types of knowledges are there in thought? The Indian epistemological tradition, it comprises of six important knowledge. Those are perception, that is perception, inference, that is anumana, verbal testimony, that is shabda, and comparison, that is upamana, presupposition, that is arthapati, and non-apprehension, that is anupalabdhi. Upalabdhi opposite is anupalabdhi, that is non-apprehension. Then this Indian knowledge system, how long, how old it is? Definitely it is very, very, very old. Why? Because we know that more than 5,000 years ago, Indian knowledge system is in use. And the objective of Indian knowledge system is, as I already told you, to change our behavioral pattern. If we bring it into education, definitely it will bring impact. And what I feel personally, that is this kind of inculcation of Indian knowledge system should be starting from the primary education level. In a simple way, not in a very diagnostic way, in a simple way, the children should be aware of what is morality, how one people can behave in a moral way. Unfortunately, in our society, what we see today, that a lot of people are now suffering from corruption. Indian society, I'm very sorry to say, I being Indian, that corruption has rooted us in our everyday life, and that can be changed perhaps with the notion of morality. So that way, Indian knowledge system is very important. And in modern society, why it is important? Because if we even consider this value system at the communitarian level, as a whole, at the mass level, then our society, our citizen, our population will change. I don't say that 100% will change, but at least let there be change of 20%, then gradually let it be 30%, let it be 40%, and that way the number will be enhanced. Our society is lacking that values, which is very, very important. And here, what I have taken into consideration, that is three things I have taken, as I told you: Vedas, Upanishad, and Vedanta. So Vedas as ITS, that is Indian knowledge system, Vedas can be considered as a very good as archaeological source of evidence for conducting research and its applicability also. This, one may ask me, what is this applicability of Vedas? How can we do it? In ancient India, the hermits, the saints, they used to stay in hills, mountains, and they used to practice. How can we do it? Yes, that is a crucial question, important question. And that's why we need to know why Vedas are important in modern ancient practices like Veda can provide a sense of peace and connection. Vedic knowledge has much to offer in modern times, with its teaching and practices providing valuable framework for understanding the self and the world. Understanding the self is very important. Has become a little part of my job. That if you understand yourself in this age of consumerism, it is very important to know yourself. Who that will promote compassion and empathy. So that way we find that Vedic knowledge is definitely relevant because Vedic knowledge can give us self-realization and achievement of inner peace. And another aspect of Vedic knowledge is that it particularly relevant in today's world because it emphasizes on interconnectedness of all things. With the rise of global issues, say, for example, climate change. Here nowadays we are talking of environment and climate change. With this issue of global, this is a global issue, and but there is one gap, that is social inequality. There is no global uniform policy. It is clear that we are part of interconnectedness, but sometimes we lack some important connections. And Veda and our actions have impact on the world around us. Vedic teachings can help us to understand our place in the world. And that way we can develop compassion, empathy, not only for our people, but at the global level. And so, what we can say that we need to discover or rather rediscover the relevance of Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge has much to offer in modern times. With its teaching and practice, providing a valuable framework for understanding of the self and the world, it can develop inner peace, promote compassion and empathy. And so, if we continue to face our complex global challenges, then wisdom of Vedas definitely can give us valuable source of guidance. And in education, it also has important. Suppose we need to develop leadership qualities, management principles, concepts, teamwork, problem-solving techniques. In our everyday life, in every administration, in academic administration, or any administration, we have this topic. But we need to tackle it with ease and calmness of mind. How can we? And I told you that we need some inner peace. So sometimes what happens, a problem comes, we get irritated, we get very, very angry. No. That way, if your inner self is controlled, if your soul has some spiritual level, then automatically you can solve the problem in a peaceful way. And Vedas are also related to social science. The concept of atom, molecules, and substances can be traced back to Vedic age. Moreover, the concept of astronomy, metaphysics, spirituality, these are all found in Rig Veda, that is ancient Hindu scripture of the Vedic period. Next is Upanishad. Sorry. In Upanishads, it is also rooted in Vedic tradition and it is a treasure of ageless wisdom. Upanishad would eventually form the fundamental understanding of Sanatana Dharma and provide direction and purpose in the life of adherents. And one thing one must remember that this kind of philosophical stand is really not applicable for Hinduism only, but it is applicable for humanity. Every human being, whether Muslim, whether Christian, whether Jewish, whether Hindu, they can follow these essence, these principles for their inner self-development. In Upanishads, we find that written in Upanishad, like Upanishad, they are Isha, Ena, no, Munda, Mandaka, Etherio, Etheravut, Andaka, and Priyadal. I'm not going into those details because there are different philosophical standing. But what I like to say that what is significant of Upanishad in modern reading? Significant is like teaching of Upanishad and people's freedom from fear of death. They explain the nature of universe, the nature of individual soul, and nature of both kind of Brahmana. And this Brahmana doesn't mean the priest, he Brahmana. No, this is Sharuna Brahmana, that is absolute reality with attributes, and Nirguna Brahmana, that is absolute reality without attributes. Now, question is how will Upanishad influence our society? Without Upanishad, there is no Indian philosophy. The six major schools or system of Indian philosophy are Shanka, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaishakya, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. And Vedanta accepts Veda as an authority, and Upanishads are but part of the essence of four Vedas. So, next question is how Upanishad is wisdom for the modern. That I already told you, it can be if we derive Upanishad into this your turn of language, linguistic way, the word Upanishad can be broken into the prefix upa, which means to annihilate, and shada, which means omit or delusion. The knowledge of Upanishad helps to loosen our bondage. It is because of bondage that we are not free. Because we are not free, so we suffer. We experience misery. it is very easy to say, but I must say that it is very difficult to practice. But yes, one, if he wants to grow up as a good human being with true essence of life, then Upanishad is very, very important. Traditionally, it is said that Upanishad means to sit near the teacher, and when our teacher asked us to sit, we sat in our ashana and never moved, and never used to move or forget it. And that is how we receive the knowledge. Now again coming the question, what is the role of Upanishad in education? Because again we say that we are all educators. Upanishad, rooted in Vedic tradition, it is a treasure of mind and it gives profound insight into the nature of life, awareness, and pursuit of knowledge. There are two types of knowledge that one can receive from this Upanishad. One is Shruti or revelation, when the great teacher or sage seers imparted that knowledge to the students through the ordinary channel of speech. That becomes Smriti. And that is second type of knowledge. So Smriti and Smriti are important. Next is coming to Vedanta. Vedanta as Indian knowledge system. And Vedanta, what is my feeling is that compared to Veda and Upanishad, Vedanta is more practical, and Vedantic practice is also more easy. Vedanta is the pursuit of knowledge into Brahmana and the Atmana. Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutra, it constitute the basic of Vedanta. That is three canonical sources. And that way it is important. And this is the main concept of Vedanta. Vedanta philosophy teaches us that the manifestation of one's divinity is the goal of life. I'm a human being, but I want to reach to the level of divine divinity. One can achieve the soul's divine nature through a conscious understanding of one's existence. And Vedantic philosophy affirms that a practitioner of Vedanta, known as Vedantis, should seek harmony with all religions. This is important. I am telling again and again that these are not for Hindu philosophy. This is for human society. Uh, Next point, what I am going to say is that this Indian philosophy of Veda, Vedanta, and Upanishad has been taken by Western people. And there we can say East and West comparison. So, one is that in Rig Veda, it is written that sun is the productive father and earth is like mother capable of childbearing. And panspermia is the belief that life on earth derives from the seeds of existence, terrestrial origin. And Swedish scientists, they have accepted this philosophy. And next to him, what we find that RNA world theory, that is Walter Gilbert, a Harvard molecular biologist. He was the first to use the term RNA world in an article published in 1986. And this RNA hypothesis proposed that DNA later becomes generic material as a result of evolution because RNA was related to unstable molecule. So Western scholars are accepting this. This is important. American philosopher Will Durant, he has written Bharata. What he has written? Within quotation, he has written, India was motherland of our race, and Sanskrit the mother of Europe language. India was the mother of our philosophy, of much of our mathematics, of ideas embodied in chemistry, of self-government, democracy. In many ways, Mother India is the mother of all. Then in case of geometry and mathematics, your vice chancellors are giving some hints. Here I'm quoting Shailenbach. Shailenbach is studied Shatapada Brahman and it proved that Indian geometry predated Greek geometry by centuries. And Shailenbach argues that path of geometry and mathematics had a ritual origin. And he had two theories of Pythagoras theorem. And what is that? That in his famous paper on the origin of mathematics, Schreidenberg, he has written old Babylon or Babylonia got the theorem of Pythagoras from India, or that both old Babylonia and India got it from a third source. Now the Sanskrit scholars do not give us a date so far back as 1700 BC. Therefore, it can be postulated that pre-old Babylonian, that is pre-1700 BC, source of the kind of geometric rituals what we see was provided in our Shastras. That is Silva Sutra, that was there. Then one Newman, he talked of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics are correct, but there is only one system which when treated with quantum mechanics. That is the entire material world. And so quantum mechanics is very important. And one thing we must remember that to understand quantum mechanics, we need to have consciousness, quote unquote, mind the word, consciousness. বাংলায় যেটা আমরা বলি জাগরণ আর উপলব্ধি, that is consciousness, that kind of consciousness. And so here I have quoted Max Planck also, who says that I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, possible as consciousness. Definitely, consciousness may be of different level, but without consciousness we cannot say it. এই যে আজকে আমি আপনাদের কাছে লেকচার দিচ্ছি, এখানে আপনারা শুনছেন, আমিও বলছি, এখানে আমাদের প্রত্যেকের মধ্যে একজনের একটা উপলব্ধির জায়গা আছে, একটা মানে বোঝার একটা জায়গা রয়েছে, দ্যাট ইজ কনসিয়াসনেস। এবার হচ্ছে হোয়াট হ্যাজ হাইজেনবার্গ after the conversation about Indian philosophy on quantum mechanism, Heisenberg also lifted that. So this study of consciousness is very important. এই বিষয়ে বহু লেখা আছে. There are hundred thousands. I would say that particularly our students in the college that please go to YouTube, type the word consciousness, and then you will see that what result is there. আপনারা দেখতে পাবেন ওখানে কি আছে নেই। সামান্য সময়ের মধ্যে অত কথা বলা সম্ভব নয়, তবু আমি এটা একটা জিনিস বলছি। আরউইন শ্রোডিঙ্গার, he said about definition, he says that if the world is needed, if the world indeed created by our observation, so there should be billions of such words, one for each one of us. How come all these words are same? So this is also his philosophy and his observation after he studied Upanishad. And then Arvind Schrödinger also talked about consciousness. He wrote, consciousness cannot be accounted for a physical term. Consciousness কিন্তু সত্যি সত্যি কোনো আমাদের শারীরিক জিনিস না, it is totally মানসিক। For consciousness, which is absolutely fundamental, it can be accounted for in terms of anything. এরপরে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি একটা ওয়েস্টার্ন স্কলার আমাদের এখানে হিয়ার উই আর স্বামী বিবেকানন্দ Nicholas Tesla. Swamiji wrote about his interaction with Mr. Tesla. And Mr. Tesla was charmed to hear about Vedantic Prana, Akasha, and Kalpa. He further stated that we call matter does not exist at all, but it is certain state of force. But Vivekananda কি বলছেন? স্বামী বিবেকানন্দ বলছেন, স্বামী বিবেকানন্দ he stipulated that universe is a limitless from form of energy vibrating. Therefore, all we see as matter is only vibration that our brain disappear as the reality. Chair, tables, etc. Presently, a leading group of neuroscientists call it a controlled hallucination. Neuroscientists say in nothing language a controlled hallucination. But the basic point is definitely the issue of consciousness. So from you can see that from Miller to Einstein, all in our country, of course, Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, all were fascinated and influenced by Vedantic thought. The media to channelize Vedantic thought is meditation. Here again, Richard Davidson, a professor of psychology in University of Wisconsin, he studied brain of hundreds of meditators. যারা ধ্যান করেছিলেন এরকম 100 জনকে উনি স্যাম্পল নিয়েছিলেন নিয়ে what was his conclusion? He came to conclusion that people with hundreds of hours of meditation can completely change their brain. He said everything is possible, from decreasing aging, growing your brain to keep you healthy. Swami Vivekananda also echoes this. He said, as by modern telescope, we can increase our vision. Similarly, by yoga, we can bring our state of vibration to higher level and see what is going on. এই হলো সামারি কিন্তু লাস্ট আমি কয়েকটা জিনিস একটু বলতে চাই that how we can apply it. Vedas in everyday life, Upanishad in everyday life, and Vedanta in everyday life. First, Vedas in everyday life. The Veda taught the society of contemplate to lead a simple life and to think on universal scale. আজকালকার আমরা সবাই না অনেক বেশি self-centered হয়ে গেছি। We don't think about our neighbor also. Universe তো অনেক দূরের কথা। So virtues like honesty, brotherhood, compassion were highlighted in Vedas. Today, all these good things are missing. We have become self-centered, greedy, devious, and we have spoiled the word for it. So one of the most fundamental things of Vedic rishis is the importance of self-awareness and mastery. So Veda are even relevant today as timeless source of spiritual wisdom, guiding principle for ethical living, and reservoir of profound insight into the nature of existence. Vedas is how is Upanishad. Upanishad is also very applicable in our daily life. There are basic 5 lessons in Upanishad. Number one, do not run after wealth and practice renunciation. Number two, enjoy life but do not get attached to the end result. Number three, life is full of darkness without self-knowledge. Number four, description of the Brahmana. This Brahmana again I say that is true self. And number five, continuation of the description of the Brahmana. So Upanishads is adding Upanishad is asking a man to cultivate righteous way, that is dharma, and to enjoy wealth and to seek pleasure. We will do everything. It is not that we will renounce everything and go to the mountain or just do the dhyana. No, not at all. We will cultivate the righteous way, dharma, and then we will enjoy the artha, and then we will have our pleasure, that is kama, etc. And the Upanishad will enrich our mind by shattering our egocentric world. Unfortunately, in this world, people are very, very egocentric. Very, very unfortunately. Finally, Vedanta. Vedanta is that one must put Vedanta in daily practice in every action of his or her selfish. Vedanta teaches someone the unity of self. You must radiate love to one and all. Of course, you will love your family, but at the same time, you must be careful about others also. The spirit of Vedanta must be inculcated in your cell or tissues, veins, nerves, and bones. And how to apply Vedanta in everyday modern life? There are six measures. One is awareness. One is what that is correct choice. You need to choose the correct person. Non-attachment, focused action, meditation, desire for liberation, and realization. So this practice of Vedanta includes prayer, worship, meditation, spiritual study, and selfless service. Again, I say it is nothing religious, nothing Hinduism. Any religious person can do it in their own way. They can do the prayer, they can do the worship, they can do the meditation, they can have the spiritual study, and they can have the self service. And Vedanta respects all spiritual tradition and it encourages the peace for all. So here I went. My main purpose was to tell you that how of things can be applied in our everyday life. And I appeal to the young people here, I can see that some students are there, that you must inculcate these things. Thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Dr. Lipi Ghosh, for taking us through Vedas, Upanishads, and Vedantas and making us realize that those are not just dry philosophical speculations, but are something that can be applied to our daily lives. Thank you so much, ma'am. So we will now move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Nisha Thakur, Assistant Professor in the Department of History, Adamas University. She did her graduation and post-graduation in history from the University of Delhi before moving to Jawaharlal Nehru University for her MPhil and PhD. Her PhD thesis was titled Materialism and Sacrality of the Mithila region, circa 700 to circa 1700 CE, which she completed under the supervision of Professor Vijaya Ramaswamy. She has numerous publications in several renowned journals like Journal of Studies in History and Culture, Journal of Indian History and Culture, Journal of Asiatic Society, and others. Her diverse research interests include in publication of her research work as well as participating in various national and international seminars. She is presently working on her book Kulo Akulo, Caste and Gender Dynamics in Mithila, which will soon be published from Primus Publishing House. We are fortunate to have Dr. Nisha Thakur amongst us, and I would invite Dr. Thakur on stage to share her insights with us.
So how many of you are hungry? Almost two. Okay, so before the PPT is displayed on the board, let me just extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present my work with all of you, especially the students. And obviously, Asansol is a very important place where exactly what I am going to discuss, you will see that it is realized actually in this place, which lies at a very important place. So I was born in Denver, but I studied in Delhi, and now I am in Bengal. I can clearly relate what I studied in the historical text about movements and about the knowledge. So how I have received knowledge, what kind of regions to which I have belonged and worked in. So this is kind of a experience that I have seen. I have also experienced what I have studied. So based on that, I would like to discuss a few things from my perspective. I'm a historian, so I will definitely talk about the historical, meaning of the term knowledge and the term India. So it is now there on the board. So much has been already said, and very detailed discussion was made by Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir and Professor Lipi Ghosh ma'am. So about ancient history, about the knowledge, about the contribution of the Indian society and Indians in the field of knowledge is we have seen so far, and it's quite detailed. So I'm not going into that details. I will just talk about the very political implication of the term knowledge. So how Indian is our knowledge? How many of us can really relate ourselves to what we have heard so far? How many of us have really, studied Vedas? We celebrate Vedas. We love, to claim that we belong to the Vedas. But do you know that in the Vedas there is also Purusha Sukta, in which the caste is first mentioned? So we often criticize that also. So that is also coming from the same kind of source to which we all, claim to belong. Then, you know, this construction of Indian knowledge, it is also very political. It is something that has been done very recently. In India, especially, if we compare it, the modern nations, the very concept of a nation, a state, it is very new. Because India is a huge territorial unit. If you look at the geographical span of India and throughout ages, we see that it is not a static entity. We are still expanding, and in some places we are also losing, some of the areas. So which lies outside of our knowledge, what India is. So. Based on this, we find that there is a shift in the manner in which we have perceived India and we have perceived ourselves as Indians. So initially, what used to happen, if you look at the books of Vincent Smith or James Mill or some of the nationalist writers like K.P. Jaswal, so you will find that there was a very different kind of approach that they used to have towards past. So it was all dates and events, mostly political, mostly rulers ruling, or some of them were defeated, some of them died, and so on and so forth. Now we see a change in the last couple of years, and in the recent presentations, two presentations before me, we see that there is a change. There is a kind of a connection that is made. Yes, in history, sequence and past, dates are very important. So one cannot skip that portion, and it sometimes makes history very boring. But it's very important that we know the sequence. At the same time, one has to relate. Event E, event B. For example, Akbar introducing Sulaykul, and event A, that is Ashoka introduced his dharma, which is it's quite different from the Buddhist concept of dharma. So can there be a relationship? Yes, there is. So this kind of a new approach is now, started in the history writing. With this, the concept of knowledge has also changed. What constituted Indian knowledge? For this presentation, I was thinking that I will use the term heritage and knowledge interchangeably, because often what knowledge implies, it's something that we need to remember, we need to tell. the next generation, and we need to preserve. So heritage also has more or less same meaning. So I have used the two terms interchangeably. So next slide. Now, this past, this sequence, this event and co-relationship has a lot to do with the concept of nation. Like I already mentioned that nation, as far as I am concerned, I have a specialization in ancient history and medieval history. So for me, nation is a very new concept. It has a lot of new, newness, lot to do with what happened in Europe, and then when it was applied in the Indian context, it was very, it's very recent. So how nation arises, how nationalism comes to our mind. We are very much aware about our present scenarios, but often the past is utilized for us to make those connections. So, nationalism is a product of a consciousness where the desire is made to understand the past. Okay, so how will the past, what kind of a role that past will play? Now, nation, as I said, that it should have certain common elements. For example, shared language. Now, recently also we see that language is a very dominant medium in which the unifications are done. So it is also true with India, it is also true with the many European countries. But in the case of India, in the colonial times, that medium, that commonness that the nation builders were seeking was very complex, because most of the proceedings, most of the proposals that were made to the Europeans, particularly the British of whom we were the colony, were made in English. You know, we celebrate English educated class of the 18th century, 19th century. But there was a gap between what they perceived about India, which is a lot to do with the European history, and the real Indians to which they wanted to, connect. So this was a very complex process, and that has stayed. That hangover of English has stayed with us. Although a lot of regional language was also used, but English has become a very, big challenge. It is not yet, erased from our way of constructing of our nations. Now, what is important? Next slide. Yeah, so shared past is therefore very important, and how will one know that what I am experiencing as a woman is also same as what a man in my community has experienced. You know, that connection is very important. That shared past is what nowadays, in the last couple of days, years, people are, writing the new kind of history in which that shared community, shared past is, discussed. Now, why it is important in India is because when in the late 18th century, and to be more precise, in the early 20th century, we find that the kind of nation, the extreme groups were thinking of were very exclusionary. You know, for example, the Mahasabhas, not only the Hindu Mahasabha, but also there were Mahasabhas in the regional, languages that were operated. Like I am from Mithila, so there was a Maithili Mahasabha, and also the Muslim League in the 1920s particularly. Those were talking about the nation, but they were very exclusionary. They excluded people. But in India, what is required later, that was realized while the Constitution of India was made, that there is a major challenge in which those ideas can be, taken further. So there was a requirement of an inclusive nationalism, to which we are still, we are discussing that how much expanded this notion of nationalism is, and how many people are really part of that nationalism. So nationalism, true nationalism, when we talk about knowledge system, is a prerequisite. First, one has to really think of themselves as Indians, which is very inclusive. It should be very inclusive, and then that knowledge can be, utilized. Now, having said this, the next slide. I forgot to give the example of the writers. Not only the political parties were very exclusionary, but we also see that in some of the writings, I think Except two of you, nobody is listening. Can you please settle down? So apart from the political parties, obviously at that time what was required, they were much familiar than I am today at this stage. But we also find that in the history writing, in the writing of the historical past, there was a tendency that emerged to look at India from a very exclusionary angle. For example, if you look at H.P. Shastri, Hari Prasad Shastri, who has worked tremendously on the Sanskrit sources, he has collected lots and lots of sources from Nepal Darbar Library and other places. He is of the opinion that because of the Muslims, when they came to India, many Brahmins started writing. And the writing, the philosophical speculations that India is very rich for, known for its richness, is actually a product of the invasions. Later, we also find that writers like A.P. Jaiswal in Indian polity, where the concepts of democracy are celebrated, we find that there is a touch of a very political agenda is hidden. So it's very difficult to really rely on those historical works that are based on the sources to which they thought are relevant. Now, moving to the next part of my presentation. So, having said this, heritage is therefore a very crucial, very political, angle. And when we discuss about a heritage, a national language, a nation, or a nation past, inclusive, like I said, that approach is very, very, very much required. So, there is the next slide. So there is a beginning of an interdisciplinary approach. For example, you must have heard about Cunningham, Alexander Cunningham. He was the director of the Asiatic Archaeological Survey of India. And Archaeological Survey of India, the term survey is very important. So he was not a trained archaeologist, he was an explorer. And while doing so, he brought a lot of new ways of learning past. He brought folk tales, he understood the social values, he talked about the belief system, he interviewed people, he spoke to people, he stayed with them. And unlucky for him that he visited Harappa, but he could not understand the value of that site. Later, he was discovered. But Cunningham, people like Cunningham, they brought with them an interdisciplinary approach that is later very prominent. And nowadays, with NEP, you will see that it's extremely important that we have an approach where different subjects are utilized. For history, for example, archaeology is extremely important. What is discovered in one place of Bengal, is it, for example, Chandraketugarh? If you look at the history of Chandraketugarh, it has to be, linked with what, the trading pattern of India was, and how, the most distant part of India, to which the Brahminical sources have very little to say. So how that is connected with the Indian past, and is there any knowledge aspect attached to it? So interdisciplinary approach is what is required now, and in history it is very nicely articulated. Next slide. So the sources of knowledge, as we see with the introduction of interdisciplinarity and the different contributions made by both Europeans as well as Indians, obviously they too cannot work in isolation. So when they two met, when that conversation and dialogue took place, that what India as a nation will be, and what is the past, what kind of a knowledge system India is going to offer to the rest of the world, we find that these are the four prime sources on the basis of which the knowledge was constructed. The first, obviously, is the text. Like Vedas is something we often are, we are often listening that in the writings we have seen this and quoted, quotations are made. So text is very important. Nobody can discard it. But text has its own problems. I will come to that later. The second important source of Indian knowledge is the excavations. That is where the actual life of ordinary men can be seen. For example, in the excavation reports, and reports are very important because if you look at the reports, that is kind of an eyewitness account. A person who has gone to a site and has recorded whatever that person has seen. So that eyewitness account, the report of any excavated site is very important. So those sites tell us about the everyday life of people, the life of women, which we often find very complex, complicated when we rely on text to understand about the woman's life and their contribution in knowledge system. So we see that objects and archaeological materials are extremely important. Then we have monuments. So if you go to Delhi, more in the core areas you go of India, core, I'm not saying that these are periphery, these are as core as Delhi is. But if you look at the political centers, the power, you will find that the monuments, the way they are preserved, they tell us about the India's past. All of you must have heard, I don't know if in Bengal this is a very famous story, but when I was in Delhi, I was a child, I was told that Delhi is an important place because it was the capital, 7 times it was the capital of different empires and different emperors they ruled. So little was I aware about the strategical position of Delhi, but Delhi remained that place where you will see that maximum, preservation works are done, and most of the monuments they are very well labeled. This belongs to Islamic time, this belongs to the Hindu time, this belongs to modern time. So a very nice labeling of the archaeological sites, the monuments are made, and those who do not come, in one's perception of India's past, which is not very important, is just thrown out of that discussion. So it is not important, so it is not preserved, so there is no money, spent. So this is how the exclusion theory, it keeps coming on, and one has to be very conscious about it. Now, about the oral tradition. Now, if you go to South India, or if you read A.K. Ramanujan, who has worked, thoroughly on the folk tales, you will see that, Kannada, in the language Kannada, you have text available, but they are very rich in oral tradition. So is Bengal. But I am telling about different regions so that for you to understand that there is a variety of sources which we are yet to decipher. So if you go to Kannada, you will find thousands and thousands of folk tales in which different kind of imaginations are registered, how women are perceived. They are very resistant in nature. They are very different from the way in which these texts are composed and compiled. If you go to Mithila, obviously you have to go to North Bihar because that is a cultural zone. So if you go there, you will find that they have very rich songs. Kokhan Harab Hamar Dukha Bola. That is a Maithili song which, in the Mithila region, people often sing when they go to Baidyanath Dham, that is Devgarh, and then they cry and tell, Lord Shiva, that when will you, finish my grief. This is something doesn't have to be documented in the text, but this is very much real, very much there. So how will the oral tradition not tell about the knowledge system? How will we discard them and say that this is oral, this is changed? My father would tell a story differently and my daughter will understand it differently when I tell. So there will be three narrations of the same event. So oral traditions are not relied upon earlier, but now it is very important that we see that how ordinary people perceive about themselves. Now these are therefore the four sources. So this I have already actually discussed that the analytical approach is very important. One has to look at the things given to us as our knowledge system in a very critical manner from the different perspectives. A woman has to see it, obviously must see, from the angle of her, what kind of dialogue she has given in a text that is not composed by any other woman or a tribal person. The way, in the Bollywood films, when you look at the tribes, how they are represented, in spite of having so many political leaders from tribal background, and why I mentioned that Asansol is very important, because you live in a place surrounded by different kind of, cultures, and all of them have equal, right over the knowledge system. So the projection is very important. The display of them is very important. So interdisciplinary approach is therefore one of the most important concerns that nowadays history writing is, looking forward to. Now, I am also giving you one example, like the Varna Ratna card. If you happen to study about music or if you have interest in the dance writings, you will see that this is one of the first texts that was composed in the 14th century. The time in which Persian was already introduced in India and people were fond of writing in Sanskrit. There is this text that is written in Maithili, and it talks about the court culture of Mithila. It talks about a culture that is very elite and the people who are involved in a lot of dance and the court culture. If you read Dowdali, you will find that this is kind of a idea of their society that is not imparted to the people in the language that it should be. Why in Maithili? Why in a vernacular? So this is kind of a very peculiar text that we find in the 14th century. This tells about their culture. Now, I will now come to the examples. If you look at the stories, the text about which I was discussing previously. So I will just tell you some examples that if you look at the text, you will find that Tulsidas, the Ramayanas, the different kathas, there is a difference between kavya and katha. Kavya is the poems and katha are the stories. Like I told you that stories may change its nature when it moves to one person to another and to one culture to another. So if you look at the Ram Katha, you will find that they are the most important source of our knowledge and they are one of the most diverse sources, one of the diverse sources that we have in India. Now the three type of Ram Kathas, there are more than 300 if you look at Ekerama region, but the three, one is of Valmiki that is composed in Sanskrit, another one a Jain narration of the Ram Katha, the story of Ram, that is Pomacharya, which was composed by Vimal Suri, and the third is the Vesantara Jataka, that is an oral text later came in the form of writing. That is a Buddhist text. I will not tell you the peculiar differences between them because we don't have time. But when you read these Ramayanas, these Ram Kathas, you will find that same plot, same characters, same names, they are used, but the story, the entire meaning of the story is different. They are very different, from each other when it comes to their ending. So they tell same story with the necessity of that community to which it belongs. So we find that Ramkatha, and I have also mentioned, you can read it later, that Ramayana is something that is still prevalent. Recently there was a stupid movie that was released of Ramayana. So you will see that in that film it has nothing to do with the text. It is very commercial, it is very, very, if I may say, suiting to today's time. So that is also a different number. Then about inscription. Inscription is very important and with this I will end. That inscription which are archaeological sources yet literary sources but are very different and India is very rich in inscriptions. I give you two examples. One is the example of Allahabad Prashasti. You have heard about Allahabad, Prayag. It's very important, very religious, very social political center. One of the most important places that emerged in the Gupta times with rulers like Samudragupta. In Allahabad, there is a pillar that belongs to ruler Ashoka, and Ashoka in that pillar talks about the harmony, peace, love. Ashoka's dharma. So he is that is edict. That is not a request that he is making. So Ashokan pillar in the Allahabad pillar, Ashokan inscription is something which is very peculiar to Indian knowledge system. He is one of the first person who talks about peace and love, which a ruler usually don't, accept. In the same pillar, we have another inscription of Samudragupta. You have heard about the term Prashasti. Prashasti means eulogy. So, if you look at this Samudragupta's inscription, he talks about his conquest. Harisen has written that inscription, and he talks about the conquest and fight, everything that Ashoka would not want it. Ashoka is someone who talked about harmony, and Samudragupta is on the other hand, on the same pillar in a different language, Sanskrit, talks about conquest. Then you have another inscription in the same pillar by Jahangir, where he's talking about his genealogy, his family background. So three rulers from three different times and in three different languages talks about their requirements, their times. So how can we believe that the knowledge system in the ancient part remained static and it didn't change, people didn't question, people didn't utilize it, so one has to be very concerned with that. One more inscription, with this I will end. Girnar inscription, that is in Junagadh. You have heard about the, site Junagadh. खिचड़ी में सुना होगा. So Junagadh is in Gujarat. It's a site much in the most western part of Indian subcontinent. You will find that in Junagadh again there is a rock inscription. There is a rock called Girnar, and on that rock also we have three inscriptions. Again, Ashoka is the first ruler who talks about welfare state. The state that should look at the public utility, welfare, public work. Then there is another inscription that was inscribed on that rock later by Rudradaman I, who talks about the installation of a lake, Sudarshan Lake. Again, he is talking about the public work and public utility, because the lake will serve a lot of people. So Sudarshan Lake is something that is very historical, which is very true, and we see that he is kind of a continuing that tradition which Ashoka has set up. On that same Ginnar rock, we find another inscription by Skandgupta. And Skandgupt is basically in that inscription, he is talking about the repairing of that lake. That was visioned by a ruler who is, not an indigenous ruler of India, he was a Kshatriya ruler who was following Ashoka. So here we see that to suit their present needs, they have borrowed the tradition, the knowledge from ancient past, from their previous rulers, and they have utilized. So one has to be, while talking about the knowledge, have to have an inclusive approach and see that how people in the past have seen their past, and how they have looked at their heritage. So with this, thank you so much.